Thank you very much. Let me share the screen here. There we go. So this is our presentation. I am Carmen, and we are going to talk about the vendor side. And we wanted to call this presentation a pacemaker for vendor management, because we think that vendor management is the heart of an LSP. So maybe that's something that we can debate in the chat later. Sorry, there we go. So I'm going to talk about what do vendor management do. And obviously I am Carmen. And then my colleague Sarah. Are you there?
Hello, thanks Carmen. I'm going to talk about what do vendor managers use for automation right now. And I'm the localization team lead at Papercup. We specialize in AI dubbing, which is a really exciting new part of localization. And lastly, Fabrizio.
Hello, everyone. As Andre just said, I am a technical solutions and vendor manager of Tradas. We are based in Brussels, Belgium. And part of my job is machine translation related, so it's technical, and then the rest is vendor management. I am also a translator by training. I have been a freelancer for over 14 years. And I also teach translation and interpretation at the University of Mons here in Belgium. And I will discuss the human-to-human interaction involving me, and then move on to the human-to-robot interaction. Back to you, Carmen.
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask a quick question before we start. I saw that many people here work in LSPs, which is nice. And I was wondering if you work with a vendor manager or if you have a vendor manager in your company. I cannot see the chat, can I? Oh, yes, there you go. Or if you want to put it in the chat, or if you want to do like a reaction thing, and then I can see more or less who knows what vendor manager is even. Okay. Oh, perfect. I was really hoping that people did. Oh, Maya is here. That's great. Okay, so we know each other, by the way, because we belong to the same vendor management group. And that's how we came up with this presentation and met on the first place. So, perfect. I see that this is no news to you, but vendor management is the processes that companies use to talk to their linguists or vendors. Obviously, we are the people who are the first point of contact, and we support project managers and then quality management if you have a team in your company. I just wanted to talk about the core responsibilities that we have usually in any LSP, kind of the default. So we do database management and we do vendor management, and this is data entry or maybe engagement with the translators or linguists, troubleshooting if there is any problem, and also negotiation, of course. We did a survey within our group of vendor managers. So I have a few percentages here that I wanted to share with you. In terms of automation, our team, well, our colleagues, they don't really think that negotiation or communication with the vendors, such as sending feedback, for example, should be automated, because that is one of the main things that the human interaction is really, really important. However, when it comes to recruitment and onboarding of vendors, we think that is something that could be automated, and is at the moment is not really. And that means finding the vendors, so the recruitment process, then selecting them, testing them, and training. So we usually look for freelance, full-time freelancers, if it's possible, and then we check the experience and we check the certifications that they've got. And that is something that is like a basic for vendor managers. From the survey, we gathered that 70% of our colleagues, of the vendor managers, do interviews only in special circumstances. So we don't really even meet these vendors, face to face in a call most of the time. And then only 15% pay for the test translation test, whatever test you do. So that is a very low percentage, obviously. So usually the vendors just do the test for free, which is another factor that is going to, we will talk about later. In terms of tools and what we use to do our daily job, for recruitment, we use LinkedIn, Facebook, social media in general, and pros.com. Probably you know Pros, which is the main website. And according to the survey, 60% of the people we surveyed, they use LinkedIn, and 30% of the people use pros.com. Which is probably pros.com was probably the only place until LinkedIn came around and just people moved on there to find translators and to find the jobs. Probably translators find the jobs there as well. In terms of translation business management systems, the main winner was XTRF. 45% of the vendor managers used that one, although Plunet is also quite used, LBS suite, and also bespoke systems are usually used. In terms of CAT tools, well, you know the main ones. And in terms of communication with the vendor and also with the internal teams, such as PMs and other teams, for example, they use Slack, Teams, Skype, Outlook, Gmail, etc. And when it comes to tracking software, in terms of tracking our tasks or maybe the testing process and things like that, we use Google Docs, Jira, Toggle, ClickUp, etc. So I have put there a QR code, and that's for the language technology landscape that it was shown in the previous presentation. And there you can see a really good overview of all the business management systems and also the management systems for translation. And now my colleague Sarah is going to continue.
Thank you. So we understand now what it is that vendor managers do on a daily basis and what kind of tools that they can use. But what does the current automation offer? So for example, if we think about XTRF or Plunet, what can they provide vendor managers? So usually there's a home or a vendor portal, which means that we can keep all the information of the freelancers in one place and give visibility to the project management team for choosing freelancers. There's usually some kind of CRM for sending out emails in bulk. You can usually put some element of personalization in there. And in terms of a chat, XTRF has a chat function, but it's more project-based, so it's not good for kind of general communication with the freelancers. In terms of quality management, both Plunet and XTRF have a quality tracking system, but it tends to be quite project-based, and it's quite limited in how much you can customize it. For XTRF, for example, you either use a 5 or 10-star review, or you have to use their LISA evaluation form. So there's kind of not a lot of scope to customize how you want to measure your quality. In terms of reporting, you can build and export reports with both of those particular systems. And for invoicing with XTRF in particular, you can create invoices through the vendor portal, but there isn't really a function for the vendors to then get paid for those invoices. So it's more information rather than automation. Next slide, please. So XTRF and Plunet are both very project management focused, and they are both missing one of the very key vendor management responsibilities, which Carmen mentioned earlier. Do you want to click through a bit more? Recruitment. So we sent out a survey, as Carmen mentioned, to the group, and we asked, what do vendor managers want to automate? What are the daily tasks that they find the most onerous that would easily work with automation? So the 3 things we came back with are applications, so that the application process for freelancers, emails in terms of communicating on a kind of a large scale rather than a one-to-one, and reporting. So is there existing software that can handle this element of freelancer recruitment? Can we use something, can we borrow from our HR colleagues, something called an applicant tracking system to help us? Next slide. So what does an ATS do? So an ATS covers quite a lot of things that we think could cross over really well into freelancer recruitment. There are examples of applicant tracking systems that I've either heard of or worked with are Personio, Workable, and Applicant Stack. So they usually have some level of sourcing and tracking, like links to LinkedIn or to job boards. They'll have a specific job post that you can create and an application form, although it's not highly customizable for what we need to ask freelancers about. It does provide tracking through all the stages, as well as email templates and that kind of bulk email feature, so you can like mass reject freelancers who unfortunately don't meet your requirements, but also means that as you're tracking the email, multiple people can log into the system and can respond, so it's not linked to one person's inbox. It has profiles, which is essentially what a vendor database does. And you can publish courses for training and track attendance, which potentially could be really useful, because if you've got training that you need your freelancers to attend and you want to find out if they've actually looked at it or not, then you can track their attendance. It also has performance analytics and reporting in terms of recruitment. So like, for example, where are people applying from? Are they looking at LinkedIn? Have they come through your company website, for example, or have they come from pros.com or somewhere else like that, like Translators Cafe, or perhaps they've even been referred by a freelancer who's working for you at the moment. So it can give you a lot of data to understand your recruitment process better. And lastly, it integrates with communication software. So something like Slack or Google Meet, it can connect up with and be part of your whole recruitment system. However, these are still quite internal on-site people focused, and they need to be quite heavily customized to reach what freelancers need. And unfortunately, they also tend to be quite expensive. And while vendor management doesn't often get a lot of investment, I think it would be a hard sell to try and get your small LSP to invest in something like this for their recruitment. So can we put something together for recruitment that doesn't use the very project-based localization software or very HR-specific software that's looking at internal candidates? What other software can we use instead? So this is what myself and my team have been doing for the past quarter, is putting together a recruitment automation based on third-party software that we have easy access to. So where do we start? Well, first we need to source candidates, and unless we want to go looking for them, which is obviously a big part of what we do, we want them to come to us. So how do we do that? Well, if you can persuade your company to put up a job post on your website in the careers page and then link it to an application form, that's one way to do it. Posting on LinkedIn, posting on pros.com, posting on social media. Maybe there's a Facebook group that you can access and ask people to apply. But what do you do for an application form? Well, ideally, you want an application form that is then going to flow into a piece of tracking software, because then it automatically will create the ticket and you don't have to have the manual job of entering all the details, attaching the CV, attaching any other files that are relevant. So some examples of forms and tracking systems that work really well together for this are Google Form and ClickUp. And also something that Microsoft do, which is MS Forms, MS Flow, and MS Planner, which all flow together. So when the ticket is submitted, so the application is carried out and sent, it creates a task for the vendor management team to assign and complete. So what can you use to track? Well, if you've managed to get an application form linked up to it, then ClickUp, I can really recommend, works really well. There is also Jira, but that's not so easy to use with people who aren't included in the license. And there's also Trello, which works really well as a ticket tracking service. In terms of emails, well, it's very tricky, as you can see, to find any way for multiple people to access emails. So one solution that I've used in the past is having a generic inbox that's accessible to the whole team. So recruitment@papercup.com. That isn't the email for my company. Please don't email it. We do something slightly differently, but that's one way you can get around making sure that a whole VM team has access to the emails. Quality testing. How do you make sure, if you are going to send your translators a test, your freelancers a test, how can you make that as easy as possible to deal with? Well, one way to do that is to put everything in Google Drive. So you have different people having different permissions for different folders. So you have the tests, you'd have then the reviewers checking the tests, giving the score, giving the results, and then you can provide those candidates with feedback and their score and decide whether you're going to move ahead with them or not. So once you've decided to move ahead with them, you need to onboard them. And how do you train them? How can you provide them with content that they need to know, like how your system works, if it's bespoke on your particular client, if it's got very specific requirements. So there are quite a few platforms that you can use for this. There's Appy Flowy, Notion, and Outline, and they provide basically a space that you can. You can upload videos or you can upload content, and you can even create quizzes for them to fill out to check that they've actually done that training content. And finally, communication. So it's really important that vendor managers are in contact with their candidates, in contact with their freelancers, and are kind of, easy to get hold of. So Slack seems to be a real favorite. Teams is great, but MS Teams is obviously, again, defined by who has a license for it, so it's more internal. Google Meet, Zoom and Skype, if you do decide to do interviews, if you have specific requirements for interviews. And finally, WhatsApp, which is usually the last resort of the project manager who needs to get a hold of a linguist they haven't heard from in a few hours. So, there is a lot of automation out there right now. And if you don't have a really expensive system that you can bring in yourself, then it is quite easy to put at least a few pieces together to make the system a little bit less manual. And now, Fabrizio, it's your turn.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Carmen, for handling the slides. So when looking at how automation can help vendor managers, we maybe need to ask the question, do we have a common recruitment process? I believe we do not. The process differs from one LSP to the other. So I want to start by saying that this line of thought is based on how I believe translators should be recruited today and how automation fits into the process. This is just my humble opinion. And I will start with a personal statement, a potentially controversial one. I am not in favor of translation tests as a vendor manager. So let me explain this based on my experience as a freelancer. And then if you want, we can discuss this further in the breakout session. So my most durable and efficient long-term collaborations with agencies never started with a test. Why, you may ask? Well, simply because I didn't have the time. I mean, I was busy working with tight deadlines and under pressure. So these tests are naturally deprioritized, and therefore they cannot simply show the true quality of work. Next slide, please. So to me, the starting point of a long-term collaboration, and this is what I'm looking for, is not a test. If you have a translation degree, if you have a consistent CV, if you have a willingness to learn, to improve your skills along the way, well, you have my attention. I know that many of you will disagree with me on this, but why would I test your skills on a 300 words sample translation, giving you more time, more than enough time that you need to do it, when I will need you to work on thousands of words with a tight deadline? If you can prove that you are making a living out of translation, if you have references, if you have a limited number of fields of expertise, well, it's fine. Of course, I will not give you a 20,000 words project to begin with, maybe, 2,000 words with guidelines and then, comments, revision. And if you're humble enough to hear the comments and willing to improve, to keep your skills up to date and ready to learn more, well, we have all the ingredients I am looking for. It is not the degree in translation that makes you an outstanding translator. It definitely helps, but it is more the willingness to adapt, to learn continuously, to get out of your comfort zone. And all this I can assess through discussions with the potential vendors. Next, thank you. Now, how human to robot interaction comes into this picture? Well, I receive dozens of applications every day, and honestly, I cannot process all of them. So I wanted to have a look at how other recruiters are doing, I mean, in other sectors, because we vendor managers in LSPs do it differently, you know that. Artificial intelligence has been used for many years in the recruitment industry, and the majority of big recruiters are using it. And you know that actually they don't really have to disclose, they do. So probably many of us have experienced it. But what are the benefits? How does it work? What is the process? Well, the idea here is that we delay the human-to-human interaction and focus on the human-to-robot interaction, and this by automating the boring part of the job and making sure that only the relevant candidates remain and reach the human recruiter. But what exactly AI can do for me? Well, it starts from screening resumes and cover letters for keywords. It can set up oral interviews. It can crawl the web for potential candidates. The testing phase could take the form of games or asking you to record a response with video. And then the algorithm will analyze your tone of voice, eye contact, nonverbal communication, facial expression. Next, please. But the question here is how reliant an automated selection can be and how fair. We know that these systems are also supposed to remove biases, so no gender or ethnic bias. But does it work? You know that I told you that at the beginning that part of my job is also linked to machine translation. And the question of gender bias in machine translation is often discussed. So let me take an example here. If an engine translates from Hungarian into English, given that Hungarian is a gender-neutral language, the system will assume that the doctor is a male, a nurse is a female, secretary female, obviously, professor male, and so on and so forth. But why exactly? Well, simply because systems have been fed and trained with huge corpora from the past, which was clearly biased. I'm sure I will get a comment from Kirti on this. But you know where this is going, right? These recruitment systems have also been trained with data. And where does this data come from? Well, it comes from anything the system could find, included biased hiring decisions from the past, probably millions of them. So how exactly are we removing biases? And let me flag a couple of potentially problematic points in automated recruitment if we use it in translation. For example, we are looking for talents based on their skills more than on their degrees. Is the university they graduated from relevant? Well, maybe it is to determine the target language, but do we say, listen, we only recruit from Harvard? I don't think we do. So how will an artificial intelligence spot talents having an atypical quality or experience? Which keywords are we going to determine as relevant for us? And what about applicants who are well aware of these recruitment techniques and know how to trick the system? When many applicants are still writing CVs to please human recruiters, others know how to get a robot's attention. And it goes as far as putting keywords in your resume, then using a white font so it's not visible, but the AI will spot it and automatically select you. Next. But then let's say I decide to give this artificial intelligence process a try, and I will, I promise. So I let it conduct the interviews to help me spot talents among all the applications I receive. How would I do it? We have seen that artificial intelligence softwares look into facial expressions, among other things. Do we know what facial expressions are needed to be a good translator? But on the other hand, I have to say that we can all agree that translators usually like to work alone, that they mainly use emails as a means of communication. They do not exactly have the sales reps profiles, so maybe they would feel more comfortable talking to a robot instead of having me, the vendor manager, asking them to take a Zoom meeting. But then to channel this back to my first statement, are they going to spend the time doing that? Well, to conclude, for me, the question remains, how much of this is relevant for us, vendor managers in LSPs? Will we be able to fine-tune an AI-powered tool to help us recruit the best translators? And this is how I will leave you, with many open questions that I hope will lead to an interesting debate. You know, I am really interested in technology and automation, and I'm always super excited to test new technologies. More than 1 year ago, I went 100% paperless. It means that I take all my notes on a tablet. I never use paper or print anything. But at the same time, every time I read a book, I have to stick my nose into it and smell the pages. So I guess I will keep on looking for a solution involving the best of both worlds. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.